Sitting at the heart of it must be what we call at Delta MV human insight. We can perhaps describe AI as the engine, but really it's human insight that's going to be fuel.
AI is the engine, but insight is the fuel. Wow, so I think that all of that sounds like a big shift in how we communicate, but I'm a little bit curious how this lays out in the real world. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Delta MV Insight Bite, where we dive into sharp, focused takes on what's shaping healthcare strategy. Today, we're digging into two hot topics, Omnichannel and AI, and asking a big question. Is AI going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? I'm Queen. I'm joined today by Dr. Neil Doi, Delta MV's Regional Managing Director. Great to have you, Neil.
Great to be here, thanks.
So let's start with the title. We're saying there's a problem with Omnichannel. That sounds a little bit negative, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe we are being a little bit negative. In fairness, we're a solutions-based consultancy. We like to provide solutions, therefore we're always looking for problems. But we speak to thousands of doctors every year all across Asia Pacific. And I think it's fair to say we are seeing a pattern where there's not that much satisfaction with what pharma is delivering to them via digital channels. And it's not just us saying this. There's a really interesting study done a few months ago by Precision AQ, and we'll have a reference in the footnotes. But they identify that in spite of all these efforts of investment in omnichannel, that we're not really seeing a rise in satisfaction from HCPs, which is surprising, a bit disappointing. And in fact, satisfaction has never even reached 50%. So we're saying at least half the HCPs out there are not satisfied with what pharma is delivering in terms of digital engagement. Clearly that is an issue.
Yeah, that sounds great, right? And we are talking to companies who are trying to do the omnichannel well, right?
No, absolutely. There's a lot of focus, a lot of investment in this area. But it feels that perhaps the consequence has been maybe a little bit too much noise and not enough relevance. And this is good for no one. It's not good for doctors. Obviously what pharma wants to communicate to them, it's really important. They kind of need to know this. It's not good for their patients. And ultimately, it's not good for the bottom line of our clients either.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just about click and opens rate. It's about whether the doctor getting what they need to make good clinical decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's talk about AI. Everyone is doing AI right now. There's so much optimism. But what's the key concern when we bring AI into an already complex omnichannel landscape? Why do you think AI could actually make things harder instead of helping like we all hope it will?
Yeah, AI is brilliant. I'm sure we're all using it in our professional lives and our personal lives. Large language models enable us to write things so much better, so much quicker than before. Agentic AI, AI/ML modeling enable us to automate the delivery of messaging in a way we've never been able to do before. So that really is amazing. However, our concern that we want to flag is that if we don't change some of the underlying approaches we've been using with omnichannel, AI is only going to make the situation worse. Specifically, what I mean is that idea that we're communicating what we want to tell doctors, not what doctors want to hear about. AI is just really going to increase the volume of that noise and decrease relevance, really to the detriment of everyone involved, doctors, patients, and pharmaceutical companies.
So like the machine is talking, but no one listening.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know that you just mentioned a really key, interesting point. What we want to say is maybe is not what they want to hear. How does that disconnect look like in practice?
It's something we see a lot, that confusion between what we call content and messaging. At Delta MV, we have a very, very clear definition of both content and messaging. Messaging is what we want to tell the doctor. Typically, we base that on where are they on a treatment adoption journey, what are the drivers and barriers of moving them along, how can we best communicate our key selling messages to facilitate that movement. That's what we call messaging. So really, it's what we want to tell the doctor. Content we define as that's what the doctor wants to engage with. What are they interested in? Now, that interesting content, it could be based around perhaps about your drug. They might be genuinely interested in greater understanding around drug-drug interaction, adverse events, specific patient profiles, etc. Maybe their interest is not really about your drug per se, but the therapeutic area. It might be about driving greater patient concordance or how to better manage patient flows in a clinic. Or maybe their interest, it's not even about a specific therapeutic area, more about the general practice of being a doctor. It might be about how to manage work-life balance, mental well-being. It might be about, they might be aspiring to become a KOL. It might be how to improve their own personal research skills or presentation skills. All these areas are legitimate foundation for thinking about content that can really drive better engagement. So that's how we separate the idea of messaging and content. Obviously, the sweet spot is where those two ideas overlap together, and very often they do, particularly the new product launch. Doctors are genuinely interested to learn more about new products that are coming through the pipeline. So that's really kind of a nice sweet spot. But for a more mature product, it becomes perhaps a bit more challenging where they kind of know pretty much what there is to know about this product. What are you going to communicate in terms of messaging? It's really tough. And then maybe you need to be a little bit more creative about what content do we need to ensure that we maintain that engagement.
So with all that said, how can AI actually help? What does getting it right look like?
We kind of see two areas where AI can have a really big positive impact, and that's around personalization and localization.
Even more buzzwords to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely, unfortunately. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about personalization. What do we mean? In some markets in the world, you might have individual prescribing data. In theory, we could have individualized marketing plans for a specific doctor. Really, in the markets we work in around Asia Pacific, that data just simply is not available. So typically we work on the idea of segments. Most of our clients, at most, they might just work with like 3 or 4 segments. They tailor their messaging and perhaps content around that segmentation model.
I think 3, 4, it feels a little bit limited to me. Why so few?
Because it's hard. Think about it. You've got to develop 3 or 4 different sets of marketing materials. Maybe got 3 or 4 different sets of messaging. So really, that's been the limiting factor. AI could really help change that enormously.
How can AI help with this, like segments?
Well, let's think about messaging. As you shared, like messaging is typically based around where a clinician sits on the treatment adoption journey. You'd want to identify the drivers and barriers and appropriate messaging to address those. The traditional treatment adoption model might have 3 or 4 stages: awareness, interest, trial, regular usage, maybe advocacy. Most of our clients are using some sort of model a bit like that, even though it's well over 120 years old. And certainly in other podcasts, we kind of critique that and feel perhaps we should be moving on. What we do at Delta MV, we use a model that has at least like 9 stages that capture not only prescribing behavior, but also how they think and feel. But let's say if we used a 9-step model, in theory, that's like 9 segments. At each stage, probably slightly different drivers and barriers. No, we need to be tailoring our message to address those. So we have 9 sets of communication materials we need to develop. AI absolutely makes that much simpler and easier.
I know like before we're talking about the messaging is what we want to tell the doctor. What about content is what the doctor wants to hear? How do you reflect that in this approach?
Yeah, really good question. So that brings in a whole new layer of complexity. Content, as I said, is really around what the doctor wants to engage with. So that reflects very much your own personal interests. So we could develop maybe a segmentation model around a group of patient-centric doctors who are very much focused on improving the well-being of the patients. There might be another group of doctors who are very focused on the science, and that's where their passion lies. There might be another group of doctors who are very interested in building a commercial practice, and that's where their emotional focus is. So we could clearly identify maybe 4 or 5 different motivational segments. So now we have 4 or 5 motivational segments. We have 9 messaging segments. In theory, wow, we're up to 45 segments already. And historically, no one has really been able to deal with that and manage that from like a real world marketing perspective. AI absolutely makes that possible. But now with AI, it's scalable, it's possible. We can develop targeted messaging and content by those 45 different segments and then deliver against that.
I think that's what really stands out, right? How this kind of personalization can become doable even without individual level data.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about this second piece you mentioned earlier, hyper-localization. How does that look like?
Yeah, localization really just adds another layer to the piece, where instead of talking to them as a doctor, We can also talk to them as a doctor being situated somewhere, maybe in a suburb, maybe in a type of clinical practice, public versus private, maybe even a specific clinic. But we can begin to also tweak and tailor messaging, not only about where they are in a treatment adoption, about what they're personally interested in, but also have a call out to maybe the name of a suburb they're practicing in, just to try and get that feeling that the communication is that much more personal and directed towards them rather than a generic broadcast.
Well, so it's not just about personal identity, it's also about the situational context, like this is for me in my world.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, that's kind of the emotional reaction we're ideally looking for when they receive an email, any kind of online digital engagement. They get, yeah, this is for me. I'm feeling it.
Wow, so I think that all of that sounds like a big shift in how we communicate. But I'm a little bit curious how this lays out in the real world. Can you walk us through a real example how this approach connects to a specific doctor?
Yeah, it's all a little bit theoretical so far. I know these 45 different segments, but let's think about a real world example. Let's think about maybe Dr. Mary. Let's imagine Dr. Mary. She works in general practice in a western suburb in Sydney in Australia. She works in a chain of medical centres, bulk billing, fully reimbursed. Doesn't really get to spend a lot of time with her patients. Many of the western suburbs are very kind of broad, cultural and linguistically diverse set of patients. Many of them may be older, maybe not speaking English at home. So that might be the context where she practices. Let's imagine we're launching a new diabetes treatment where over and above glycemic control, also some added benefits about organ protection. So we can imagine Dr. Mary has heard about this drug she's potentially interested in, but really up to now the benefits haven't been strong or compelling enough to get her to put that first patient on. The barriers are really things about she's got to take the time and effort and explain to the patient why she's changing their treatment. So you can imagine her, what might the messaging be? We might focus on a particular patient profile who are going to benefit most from that increased organ protection. We might, the supporting data might be things about, reduction in hospitalizations for those patients who are able to move onto this new treatment. So that might be what the messaging could focus on.
So basically, we're just not trying to educate her, but we also need to cut through all the noises with something relevant. So what about the content? What are content that we should engage her in a way that make her interesting?
Well, let's look at Dr. Mary's situation. She works in a suburb with a culturally, linguistically diverse population. Maybe patient concordance is a challenge. Any tips, tricks, tools that enable her to support her patients to remain concordant to treatment, you can imagine would be really something quite interesting to her that she would want to engage with. And particularly in that case, you might think there could well be a sweet spot. On one hand, we can start talking about our drug. We could layer that in with some of the challenges of working with a particular patient profile, where it might, for those particular patients, what are the tips and tricks that would help her or support her to move them on from their current treatment onto this new treatment.
So let's go back a little bit about the second piece. Earlier, you mentioned the hyper-location. How do you reflect that in the communication to this doctor?
Hey, it could be as simple as a shout out to the suburb she's in. So maybe just in an email subject headline, it could be, for doctors like you in Bankstown or wherever her suburb is, just the way, this email's a little bit more relevant for me. We could also use it maybe in some of the supporting data. So, for example, if we're talking about hospitalization or reduction in hospitalization, we could say, in Bankstown, based on existing data, we know that X number of patients could avoid hospitalization if they moved onto this treatment.
I think it changed everything, right? It feels like this is something written for her, not just someone like her.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the emails you get. If you get an email that you feel it's directed towards you personally, aren't you far more likely to engage with that? And that's exactly what we're looking for with Dr. Mary. And that's a great promise of AI, that even if we don't have individual data about Dr. Mary, we're able to do a much greater level of personalization and localization with that intent in mind.
I think I get your point. So you've laid out the opportunity for deeper personalization with smarter localization. But what is the next step? So imagine you're a product manager or a brand lead. How do you make sure AI delivers on that promise?
Sitting at the heart of it must be what we call at Delta Envy human insight. So, in spite of all the wonders of technology and all the great things we can achieve with AI, ML, etc., we need to keep that human element, that human understanding about what people need, they want, what they feel, how they engage with things. And that's a really, really important part of it. The danger is if we don't have that, we can't really deliver against the promise of a truly customer-centric approach to communication. And that kind of makes the problem even worse. We're just going to get lots more noise and far less relevance and therefore far less engagement with healthcare professionals. So AI, for all its brilliance, we can perhaps describe AI as the engine, but really it's human insight that's going to be fuel for that engine.
You know what I really like? That lies. AI is the engine, but insight is the fuel. It just reminds us perfectly well that the technology alone isn't the answer.
Definitely.
So this conversation really brought together the power of AI. AI can flood the conversation with more of the same, or it can finally help us to say the right thing to the right person at the right time. The choice, I think, is ours. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insight. And to everyone, we hope the episode gave you something to think about or even to rethink. Thank you for joining us on Delta NV Inside Bite. Don't forget to stay tuned for the next episodes. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.